The night was colder than Daniel Reeve expected. The human campfires burned low, flickering against the shadows of the alien forest. Tall trees stretched high into the dark sky, their branches tangled like twisted arms, covered in silver-blue leaves that glowed faintly in the starlight. Daniel pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders and kept walking. He was on patrol duty. His squad had been sent to guard the edge of the human outpost. They were new settlers on this world, a planet rich in water, minerals, and strange life. The scientists called it Epsilon Prime, but the soldiers simply called it the Frontier. Daniel's boots crunched softly on frozen soil as he scanned the forest with his helmet light. The light beam cut through mist that rolled low between the roots. Every sound seemed louder at night, the distant call of winged creatures, the crack of a branch, the whisper of wind in the alien grass. Daniel wasn't afraid, but the loneliness pressed on him. He checked his wrist display. Another hour of patrol before he could return to camp. He sighed and kept moving. Then he heard it, a faint rustle, a sharp intake of breath. Not far, maybe 20 meters ahead. Daniel froze and raised his rifle, the targeting scope sliding into place over his right eye. He listened carefully. There it was again, the sound of movement, quick and desperate, like someone trying to stay hidden. Daniel's heart quickened. It could be an animal. It could be one of the strange predators the scientists warned about. But something about the rhythm of the sound, it was cautious, intelligent. Daniel stepped forward slowly, keeping his weapon steady. His voice was calm but firm. "Who's there?" Silence answered him. He took another step, scanning with his light. That was when he saw two golden eyes reflecting the beam. They blinked, wide with fear. Daniel lowered his rifle slightly. The figure stepped back, half hidden behind a tree trunk. He saw fur, damp and tangled, the shape of long ears, and the trembling form of a small body. It was no predator. It was a girl. She was not human. Her features were delicate, her face narrow with a fox-like shape. A tail curled around her, fluffy but soaked by the cold mist. She wore simple cloth wraps, torn and frayed, not enough to guard her from the chill. Her arms hugged herself tightly as she shivered. Her breathing came in sharp, frightened bursts. Daniel's heart softened. He remembered the reports. Nomadic tribes of Vulpine aliens, rarely seen near human settlements. The scientists believed they avoided contact. Some soldiers thought they were myths. But now, one stood before him, young and vulnerable. He slowly lowered his weapon all the way. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." She tilted her head, ears twitching at his voice. She didn't understand all his words, that was clear, but she recognized the tone. Her eyes stayed fixed on him, full of suspicion. Daniel thought quickly. The night was freezing and she was shivering. He unstrapped the thermal blanket rolled at his side. It was standard gear for patrol light, strong and warm once activated. He held it out with open hands, showing he meant no harm. "Here," he said gently. "Take it." The girl blinked, confused. She glanced from the blanket to his face. For a moment, Daniel thought she might run. But then the cold wind swept across the forest, and her body shook visibly. Slowly, carefully, she stepped forward. Her claws barely touched the soil as she crept closer, golden eyes never leaving his. She reached out, hesitated, then snatched the blanket quickly, like she expected a trick. Daniel stayed perfectly still, letting her decide. She wrapped the blanket around herself, pulling it tight. The warmth activated, glowing faintly blue, and her tense expression softened with relief. For the first time, Daniel saw her lips curl into a tiny smile. "You're safe now," Daniel whispered. She tilted her head again, as if studying him. Then, in a voice soft and broken, she spoke one word. "Thanks." Her accent was strange, the syllables rough, but the meaning was clear. Daniel's chest tightened. She knew some human language. "What's your name?" he asked. She blinked, trying to understand. He tapped his chest. "Daniel." After a pause, she pointed to herself. "Lyra." Daniel repeated it softly. "Lyra." Her ears twitched again. She seemed pleased that he said it correctly. For a long moment, they simply stood in the forest, the human soldier and the Vulpine girl, wrapped in silence. Somewhere above, a strange bird sang a mournful note, and the mist shifted between the trees. Daniel knew he should report this immediately, but something told him to wait. This was not just a meeting. It felt like fate. Lyra's tail uncurled slowly from around her body, flicking lightly in the mist. She looked less afraid now. She took a cautious step closer, close enough that Daniel could see the fine patterns of silver fur along her face. Her eyes searched his as if trying to decide if she could trust him fully. Daniel smiled. "You'll be all right." Lyra blinked at him, then tugged the blanket tighter. She crouched down on the forest floor, her body relaxing for the first time. She seemed exhausted, maybe from wandering alone. Daniel lowered his rifle to the ground and sat a short distance away, keeping respectful space. Neither spoke for several minutes. The forest sounds filled the silence, whispers of wind, creaks of trees, the distant crackle of ice forming on leaves. Daniel felt strangely calm. The fear of patrol was gone. In its place was curiosity. Finally, Lyra spoke again, her voice halting. "Why?" "Give," Daniel thought carefully. He pointed to the blanket, then to her. "Cold. You need it." He tapped his chest. "Help." Lyra's ears twitched again. She seemed to understand. She nodded slowly. A faint warmth spread inside Daniel. He had done something simple, given a blanket butt in her eyes. It seemed to mean so much more. Minutes passed. Lyra grew drowsy in the warmth. Her golden eyes blinked slowly, fighting sleep. Daniel knew he couldn't stay here all night. The camp would wonder where he was. But as he looked at her small form curled in the blanket, he couldn't bring himself to leave her, vulnerable in the dark. He stayed until dawn, when the first light touched the horizon. Painting the sky with pale orange, Lyra stirred. She looked at Daniel, then stood, the blanket still wrapped around her, glowing faintly. She hesitated, then carefully folded it and placed it back into his hands. Daniel frowned. "Keep it. You need it." But she shook her head. Her people, he realized, probably didn't accept gifts lightly. Instead, she gave a small, backward, but heartfelt. Her eyes met his once more, filled with something unspoken. Then she turned and slipped back into the forest. Vanishing among the trees without a sound, Daniel sat there, holding the blanket, watching the mist close around her path. His heart beat slowly, his thoughts tangled. He didn't know why this meeting felt so important. But deep inside, he knew one thing: he would see her again. The days passed slowly after that first meeting in the forest. Daniel Reeve returned to his duties at the human outpost, but his thoughts were never far from the Vulpine girl. Every time he sat down to clean his rifle, or walked the perimeter fence, or ate a ration pack under the dull glow of the camp lights, her golden eyes came back to him, Lyra. It felt unreal, like a dream. He had given a stranger his blanket, nothing more. Yet that simple act kept echoing inside him. He had seen fear in her eyes, but also courage. He had seen gratitude to something deep, something unspoken. Daniel knew he might never see her again, but part of him hoped. On the fourth night after their encounter, he was patrolling the same stretch of forest. The mist clung low, glowing faintly under the stars. His boots were silent against the mossy ground. He thought about that moment, the blanket, her voice saying thanks. Then he heard it again. A rustle, a soft footstep. Daniel froze, scanning the trees with his wrist light. His heart jumped when he saw a familiar shape between the trunks. Small, graceful, fur catching the faint glow. "Lyra," he whispered. The girl stepped into the open slowly. She wore the same simple wraps, but her posture was different now. She wasn't shivering or cowering. Instead, she walked with purpose, her ears alert. Her golden eyes locked on him. Daniel lowered his weapon and held his hands open. "It's all right. I remember you." Lyra tilted her head, then reached into a small pouch at her side. She pulled out something small and glowing faintly, clasped in her clawed hand. She stepped closer and stretched out her arm. Daniel looked down. It was a pendant, carved from smooth stone, strung with thin cords of woven plant fiber. Strange alien symbols ran along its surface, glowing softly with pale light. "For you," Lyra said in her broken human tongue. Daniel blinked in surprise. "For me," she nodded. "Gift," he hesitated. Soldiers were trained to be careful about taking alien objects, but looking into her eyes, he couldn't refuse. Slowly, he accepted the pendant. It felt warm in his palm, almost alive. "Thank you," he said. He slipped it over his neck. The stone rested against his chest, the glow fading to a soft hum. Lyra's tail flicked once, a sign of approval. She crouched on the ground, drawing in the dirt with a stick. Her movements were quick, precise. Daniel crouched too, curious. She drew a shape of the forest, then added circles above its ships. Maybe. She tapped the shapes and made a low, growling sound. Sky. Machines. Daniel frowned. Sky machines? She nodded firmly. Danger. Come soon. Daniel's chest tightened. Could she mean enemy craft? He had heard rumors of other alien species watching this planet. His commanders dismissed them. But Lyra's warning made his blood run cold. He tried to ask more questions, using gestures and simple words. Lyra struggled, but between her broken human speech and his guesses, the picture grew clearer. Her people had seen strange machines moving through the skies at night, heading toward the forests near the human outpost. Daniel swallowed hard. If this was true, the camp could be in danger. He stood slowly. "I have to tell my commander." Lyra's ears twitched uneasily. She looked at him with sharp eyes. "Commander, not listen." Daniel frowned. How could she know that? But her expression was firm, almost sad. She stood and tugged at his sleeve. "You listen." He nodded. "I'll listen." They spent the next hour trying to communicate, trading words and gestures. Daniel learned her vocabulary was small, but clever. She knew words like fire, danger, forest, and enemy. He taught her simple words back, pointing to objects and naming them. She repeated, sometimes clumsy, sometimes sharp. It was slow, but progress. And strange as it was, Daniel enjoyed it. He had never felt so patient before. With her, every small word felt like a victory. When the sky began to lighten, Lyra backed away. She placed her hand on the pendant around his neck and said softly, "Safe." Then she vanished into the forest again, leaving Daniel with more questions than answers. Back at camp, Daniel wasted no time. He went straight to his commander, Captain Lorne, a broad-shouldered officer with sharp eyes and little patience. "Captain," Daniel said quickly, "I have reason to believe we may be facing hostile forces soon. Local tribes have reported sky machines moving through the area. It could be." Lorne raised a hand. "Reeve, you're telling me you've been talking to the natives again?" Daniel hesitated. "Yes, sir." Lorne's jaw tightened. "We've been over this. Command doesn't want us interfering with them. They're primitive, superstitious. You can't trust their stories." "With respect, sir," she was clear. She described ships, not spirits or myths. "She warned us." "Enough," Lorne snapped. "I don't want to hear another word about it. Your job is patrol, not playing ambassador. Do you understand?" Daniel clenched his fists, but forced himself to nod. "Yes, sir." Dismissed, he left the office with anger boiling in his chest. He knew what he heard. He knew Lyra was no liar, but now he was alone with the warning. Powerless to act, he walked out into the cold air, the pendant heavy against his chest. He looked at the glowing symbols etched into the stone. For a moment, he thought he felt it pulse, like a heartbeat. Maybe it wasn't just a gift. Maybe it was something more. That night, Daniel went back to the forest. He didn't care about orders anymore. He had to see Lyra again, had to learn more. She was waiting for him. This time she wasn't alone. Two older Vulpine figures stood with Hurtler, with darker fur, carrying simple weapons made from bone and crystal. They watched him with cautious eyes, ready to defend. But Lyra stepped forward quickly, motioning for peace. She spoke to them in her language, her voice soft but firm. Slowly, they lowered their weapons, though their eyes never left Daniel. Lyra pointed to him. "Friend." Daniel raised his hands calmly. "I mean no harm." The older ones didn't understand, but they seemed to trust Lyra's judgment. After a moment, they melted back into the trees. Leaving the two alone again, Lyra sat on a fallen log and patted the spot beside her. Daniel sat careful to keep his distance. She pointed to the pendant again. "Keep. Protect." Daniel nodded. "I will." For a long while, they sat together under the alien stars. Two lives from different worlds, bound by a fragile thread of trust. Daniel knew he was breaking rules. He knew his commander would not forgive him if he found out. But he also knew this was bigger than orders. Lyra had given him a gift, a warning, perhaps a chance. And deep inside, Daniel felt something stir. Hope. Daniel Reeve was finishing his patrol near the eastern fence of the outpost when the first explosions shook the ground. The night sky lit up with streaks of red fire, cutting through the darkness like claws tearing across the heavens. The alarms screamed from the towers, and soldiers scrambled to their stations. "Drakthor!" Someone shouted. Daniel's blood ran cold. Lyra's warning was true. Another blast hit the western wall, sending shards of metal flying. Smoke poured into the air. The ground trembled as more enemy fire rained down from above. Daniel raised his eyes and saw them sleek black ships hovering above the trees, their surfaces glowing with unnatural light. They were silent, except for the shriek of their weapons. Daniel dashed for cover, his rifle ready. But before he could reach the barricades, the Drakthar troops descended. They were tall, armored, their bodies hidden behind jagged suits of black metal. Their helmets gleamed like insect shells, their voices a harsh growl as they barked commands to each other. Energy weapons crackled in their claws, spitting bolts of blue fire. Daniel dove behind a crate as the first shots tore through the camp. Sparks flew, alarms wailed, and human soldiers fell one by one. Chaos swallowed the outpost, Reeve. "Over here!" His squad leader yelled, but before Daniel could move, the ground split with another blast. The leader was gone, swallowed by fire and dust. Daniel coughed, ears ringing, and stumbled to his feet. He aimed his rifle and fired at the nearest Drakthor. The rounds pinged against its armor but barely slowed it down. The alien turned, its weapon glowing, ready to finish him, and then the forest answered. A shadow moved between the trees. Arrows tipped with crystal shards flew through the smoke, striking the Drakthor in weak spots between plates of armor. The alien staggered, snarling, and fell. Daniel blinked in shock. More shadows appeared, moving swift and silent. Vulpine warriors, Lyra was among them. She darted from cover, her tail flashing in the smoke, her golden eyes fierce. She slashed at a Drakthor's leg with a curved blade, knocking it off balance, while her kin finished it with a rain of arrows. "Daniel," she cried, her voice rough but clear. He ran toward her, dodging fire. Together they ducked into the trees, away from the burning camp. Daniel wanted to argue, to say he should stay and fight with his unit, but the outpost was falling fast. Survival was the only choice now. Lyra led him through twisting forest paths only her people knew. The sounds of battle faded behind them, placed by the whispers of wind and the pounding of his heart. At last they stopped in a clearing. Daniel bent over, gasping, his chest heaving. "Why? Help me?" he asked between breaths. Lyra's ears twitched. She pointed to his chest, to the pendant. "Protector." Daniel touched the stone. It pulsed faintly, as if alive. He frowned. "What is this really?" Lyra knelt and placed her hand over the pendant. The symbols glowed brighter. Daniel's wrist display beeped suddenly, flashing with strange signals. He stared in shock as the pendant connected with his tech, unlocking hidden data streams. "What the?" he muttered, on his display. A pattern appeared. The energy signature of the Drakthar weapons, their shields, their weak points. It was as if the pendant was showing him exactly how to fight them. Daniel's eyes widened. This changes everything." Lyra nodded firmly. Gift for trust. Now fight. Before Daniel could respond, more Dracthyr soldiers crashed through the trees. Lyra leapt forward, her blade flashing, while her kin loosed arrows from the shadows. Daniel raised his rifle, this time aiming at the weak points shown on his display. The results were instant. Shots that once bounced harmlessly off their armor now pierced through gaps, dropping the enemy one by one. The Vulpine warriors moved with grace, striking and vanishing, while Daniel's firepower filled the gaps. For the first time, humans and Vulpine fought side by side. When the last Dracthyr fell, silence returned to the forest. The ground was littered with smoking armor and broken weapons. Daniel lowered his rifle, his chest heaving. Lyra stood across from him, fur damp with sweat, her blade dripping blue sparks from the enemy's blood. She met his eyes and gave a small nod. "You fight." "Like us," she said. Daniel almost laughed, though it came out as a tired cough. "I had good help." Hours later, Daniel and Lyra crept back toward the edge of the outpost. Fires still burned, and the air was thick with smoke. The Dracthyr ships hovered above, raining destruction. But now, Daniel saw more than fire and chaos. He saw patterns, weaknesses, openings. The pendant showed him flashes of energy, gaps in their shields. He grabbed Lyra's arm. "We can fight back." With this, Lyra's ears flicked. "Show your people." Daniel hesitated. His commander would never trust her tribe. He might even order them driven away. But Daniel knew the truth now. Without the Vulpine, without Lyra, humanity had no chance. He tightened his grip on the pendant. "Then I'll make them listen." As the night deepened, the battle spread across the forest. Daniel and Lyra fought together, moving between skirmishes, striking where the Dracthyr were weakest. Word spread among the soldiers strange allies were fighting alongside them, turning the tide. At first, humans stared with suspicion. But when they saw Vulpine arrows pierce Dracthyr armor, when they saw Daniel survive impossible odds with Lyra at his side, doubt began to fade. By dawn, the forest floor was scarred with fire, but the Dracthyr advance had slowed. Humanity still stood, battered but unbroken, because they were no longer alone. Daniel looked at Lyra as the sun rose. Her fur glowed with the light, her eyes bright despite exhaustion. The pendant against his chest pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. In that moment, he understood what she had given him. Not just a gift, not just a weapon, but a bridge. Two worlds were no longer strangers, and the war had only begun. The smoke of battle still clung to the air. The outpost was damaged, its walls broken, its watchtowers half collapsed, but it still stood. The humans had not been wiped out. For the first time, the Dracthyr had been forced back. Daniel Reeves stood at the edge of the camp, exhausted, his uniform scorched, his rifle hanging from his hand. Beside him stood Lyra, her fur singed in places, her breathing sharp from fatigue. Around them, Vulpine warriors moved silently among the trees, watching, guarding, making sure the Dracthyr did not return. The humans stared at them with wide eyes. Some whispered in fear. Others whispered in awe. No one had expected these primitive tribes to fight like this fast, cunning and deadly. Captain Lorne stormed toward Daniel, his face dark with anger. "Reeve," he barked. "What in hell are you doing with them?" He jabbed a finger at Lyra and her kin. "They're not our allies. They're a liability." Daniel clenched his fists. He was tired, but he wasn't about to step back. "They saved my life. Without them, we'd all be dead already." "They're savages," Lorne snapped. "We don't even know what they want from us." Lyra's ears twitched at his sharp tone. She didn't understand every word, but she understood the anger. She stepped forward, her golden eyes bright. She spoke in her broken human tongue, not salve. "Savage. Friend." She pointed at Daniel. "He give blanket. I give gift. We fight. Together." Soldiers murmured among themselves. The captain's expression softened slightly in surprise, but he shook his head. "One good deed doesn't mean we can trust them with the safety of this camp." Daniel pulled the pendant from his chest and held it high. "Then trust this." The symbols glowed, pulsing with soft light. Daniel tapped his wrist display, showing the gathered soldiers the streams of data. The pendant's connection highlighted Dracthyr movements, energy flows, shield weaknesses. "This isn't just a trinket," Daniel said loudly. "It's a key. It shows us how to fight them. And it only works because she trusted me." He nodded toward Lyra. "Because we trusted each other." The soldiers looked at one another. Doubt remained, but so did hope. They had seen the truth with their own eyes. Humans and Vulpine fighting side by side, defeating enemies they couldn't stop alone. Captain Lauren's jaw worked as he struggled for an answer. At last he gave a heavy sigh. "Fine, if this pendant can give us an edge, then we'll use it. But this doesn't mean I trust them." Lyra tilted her head, confused, but Daniel gave her a small smile. "It's a start." The next days were filled with preparation. Scouts confirmed the Dracthyr were regrouping deeper in the forest. They had not retreated far. They were planning another strike, bigger and deadlier this time. The humans would not stand alone. The Vulpine tribe brought knowledge of hidden trails, natural traps, and the patterns of the forest. The humans brought rifles, grenades, and armor. Slowly, they built a plan together. There was no common language, but there was a common goal: survival. Daniel found himself at the center of it all, moving between soldiers and Vulpine, translating gestures, calming fears, building trust. He was no officer, but both sides listened to him because he carried the pendant. And because Lyra stood at his side like a silent promise. At night, by the campfire, Daniel and Lyra practiced words. She learned faster than he expected. She pointed to the fire. Warm. She pointed to the sky. Stars. She pointed to him. Friend. Daniel smiled every time. The Dracthyr came at dawn. The forest shook as their ships descended again. Black shadows slicing through the mist. Energy fire rained down, tearing through trees and earth. Their armored soldiers marched in ranks, growling in their strange tongue. Certain this time they would crush all resistance. But the humans and Vulpine were ready. Traps snapped shut. Pits opened. Arrows rained from the trees. Explosions erupted in carefully planned ambushes. Human rifles targeted weak points highlighted by the pendant, each shot striking true. The Dracthyr lines staggered under the assault. Daniel fought in the center, his rifle steady, the pendant glowing brightly against his chest. Lyra fought beside him, her blade flashing, her movements graceful and fierce. Together they moved as one. He covered her from a distance. She guarded him up close. For hours the battle raged. The Dracthyr pressed hard, their ships pouring more troops into the fight. But the humans and Vulpine refused to break. At last, Daniel noticed something new on his display. The pendant revealed a pulsant energy rhythm coming from the Dracthyr ships, a weakness in their shields. If they struck it right, they could bring the ships down. Lyra, Daniel shouted, pointing. The ships? Weak there. She followed his gesture, eyes narrowing. She whistled sharply, a call that echoed through the forest. Her kin responded instantly, shifting their fire toward the target. Human soldiers joined in, rockets launching, grenades exploding. The sky lit up as one Dracthyr ship shuddered, sparks flying across its hull. With a final roar, it broke apart and crashed into the forest in a ball of flame. A cheer rose from both humans and Vulpine alike. The Dracthyr faltered. Their advance slowed, their confidence broken. One by one, their soldiers fell. Overwhelmed by the combined fury of two species fighting as one, by midday, survivors retreated, their ships limping into the sky. For the first time, the Dracthyr fled. The battlefield was silent. Smoke rose in thin trails. Bodies lay scattered, human and Vulpine alike. But the living stood victorious. Daniel lowered his rifle, trembling with exhaustion. Lyra stood beside him, her fur streaked with ash, her golden eyes shining with triumph. They looked at each other, and in that moment no words were needed. They had won. That night, there was no more fear in the camp. The humans lit fires not for survival, but for celebration. Food was shared, wounds were treated, and laughter echoed through the trees. For the first time, Vulpine and humans sat side by side without suspicion. Captain Lorne approached Daniel, his expression softer than Daniel had ever seen. "I was wrong," he admitted quietly. "They're not savages. They're allies. And you were right to trust them." Daniel nodded, too tired for pride. "It wasn't me, Captain. It was her." He glanced at Lyra. Lorne looked at her too, then gave a short bow of respect. Lyra tilted her head, not fully understanding. But Daniel saw the meaning in the gesture. Later, as the fires burned low, Daniel and Lyra sat apart from the others. The pendant glowed softly between them. Daniel touched it and asked, "What is it really?" Lyra's eyes softened. She spoke slowly, carefully. "It is gift of honor, for my people given, only when trust is true." Daniel's throat tightened. "Why give it to me?" She looked at him, her golden eyes warm. "Because you gave first. You gave warmth, blanket, heart." She touched the pendant gently. "Now, I give back." Daniel was silent for a long moment. He thought of that first night, the shivering girl in the mist, the simple act of kindness. He never imagined it would lead to this alliance, a battle won, a future changed. He smiled. "Then I'll keep it. Always." Lyra's tail flicked once in quiet approval. Together they looked at the stars, the smoke drifting away into the night. The war was not over, the Drakthor would return. But humanity would not face them alone anymore, in giving a blanket to a stranger. Daniel had received something far greater: trust, friendship, hope, and perhaps the beginning of peace.